Johnny Talk Sports in with the Week 13 college football predictions. And tomorrow night, at the moment I'm recording this Monday afternoon. So just in case you're listening to this later this week, tomorrow night is the first release of the College Football Playoff Committee's playoff rankings. Now, I'm looking forward to seeing these first playoff rankings because I want to see what the committee is really going to value or what they have valued so far in this college football season, where we've seen every single conference start their season at different times. And I'm wondering that if these rankings that we're going to see tomorrow night are going to set the tone for the rest of the college football season. For example, how will the playoff committee value Clemson's loss to Notre Dame with not having Trevor Lawrence at quarterback that night? How will they evaluate a team like Ohio State that started out the season so late, despite being undefeated right now? How will they value Ohio State's season so far? And how will they value the Pac-12 season so far? Because you've got teams like Oregon and USC that could easily win out and become a 7-0 conference champion. How will they value the SEC? How will they value a team like Texas A&M, whose one loss was to Alabama, who's currently number one, which is the unanimous number one according to the Associated Press. And A&M has also had 2 postponements, and it's quite possible that A&M, could it cost them? Could the postponements cost them, especially with a makeup date with Ole Miss is set for December 19th, the same day of the SEC championship game? Could that cost them a spot because they won't be really looking at that regular season matchup? And even if they are, these rescheduled matchups, they're not a guarantee. So before I get into my picks, let me just tell you what my top 4 is. So I'm going to give you my top 4 and my first 2 out. So at number 1, I have Alabama, because Alabama, I believe, has the best resume so far this season. They have wins over Texas A&M and Georgia. So they are really 2 top 12 teams right now that Alabama has beaten this season. Number 2, I have Notre Dame. They have what I think is probably the best win of the season right now, and that is against Clemson. But Trevor Lawrence was not in that game. He didn't start at quarterback that night. So it really begs the question, could Clemson have won that game against Notre Dame if Trevor Lawrence was the quarterback that night? Because it's quite possible that if Trevor Lawrence was in that game, Clemson's play calling would have been a lot different. Because remember, Clemson was playing from behind for the majority of that first half. So if you just put Trevor Lawrence in that game in the first half, maybe this game turns out a lot differently. At number 3, I have Ohio State. And Ohio State, I'm very interested. Will the committee be understanding of Ohio State not having the signature wins right now based off the Big Ten starting their season late? Because even if they do win out, their wins against Michigan and Penn State, are they going to be really valued as much? Because Penn State, they were ranked at the time that they beat them, but Penn State hasn't won a game this season. And for Michigan, it's always hard to beat a rival school. But Ohio State's made it look easy against Michigan throughout this century. But Michigan's not doing that well this season either. So could the lack of competition that the Big Ten has, the Big Ten is still a strong conference, but as far as rankings are concerned, because they would beat an unranked Michigan team. And if they were to win out, could they get left out of the playoffs due to the lack of resume that Ohio State can build up? Because their best win is against Indiana. And at number 4, I have Clemson. And Clemson does have that one loss against Notre Dame. But Trevor Lawrence was not playing that night, so it does beg the question, as I said a moment ago, if Trevor Lawrence plays in that game, does Clemson win it? And my first 2 out right now are Texas A&M at 5, and I have Florida at 6. Now that's mainly because A&M's one loss is to Alabama, and A&M does have that really tiebreaker over that 5th spot right now over Florida, based off of A&M. They beat Florida. But I will argue and say that I can understand your argument, because I kind of agree with the argument that if Florida and A&M played again, I think Florida could probably win this time around. But what will the committee value? Will the committee put A&M at number 4 and Clemson at 5, based off of the A&M's one loss is to the number 1 team in Alabama, but Clemson's one loss is the number 2 team in Notre Dame? So I kind of do envision that the one thing that I do want to know, or what's going to really reveal what the committee's intentions are, is what they do at number 4. Because I could see maybe putting A&M at number 4, but I could also see maybe sticking with Clemson at 4. So it's kind of hard to say. But we will find out tomorrow night. So let's get to the Week 13 college football predictions. So we have 3 Friday games to predict this week. And the first of the Friday games is number 17 Iowa State and number 22 Texas. Now this is going to be one of the better games of the week. You've got a top 25 matchup. You have got Iowa State having the leading rusher in college football in Breece Hall with 1,169 rushing yards and 15 touchdowns. But Iowa State's defense is allowing 360 yards per game, which is 38th in the FBS. While Texas, on the other hand, is there a concern? Is there going to be a changing of the guard at Texas in this offseason, as it's been rumored that Urban Meyer, he could be a candidate for the Texas head coaching position, according to DallasNews.com. But Tom Herman says he's not concerned about his job. He's just focused on this university and the program. So is this a must-win for Texas to keep Tom Herman as the head coach of the Texas Longhorns? Well, Texas, after their 2-game losing streak to TCU and Oklahoma. Oklahoma, a game where they probably could have won. Texas, for the season overall, is allowing 401 yards per game, which is 57th in the FBS. But quarterback Sam Ehlinger has 7 rushing touchdowns this season. And in the 3-game winning streak that Texas is currently on, Sam Ehlinger has 6 touchdown passes and only 1 interception. So Sam Ehlinger, he's getting smarter with the football the further on the season goes. But unfortunately, I'm just not sure if Texas is going to be able to stop Breece Hall in this game, or even the Iowa State offense in general, because they barely beat West Virginia this past week. So I'm going to pick Iowa State in this one. I apologize, I misspoke. Texas and West Virginia was actually November the 7th. Last week's game against Kansas for the Longhorns was postponed. So the last time Texas played was November 7th. So I think that this Texas team is going to come out a little rusty and a little flat to begin the game. And I think Iowa State will take advantage of that. Our next Friday matchup is Nebraska and Iowa. This is the traditional day after Thanksgiving rivalry matchup, although if it weren't for the schedule change for the Big Ten, this game was ultimately not going to happen on this particular day. So it would have broke the tradition. But we still have this matchup the day after Thanksgiving, and this is really huge for the state of Nebraska, and I can speak for the state of Nebraska as I am a resident in the state of Nebraska. Nebraska and Iowa. Well, Iowa, they started off really sluggish this season, losing their first 2 games of the year to Purdue and Northwestern. But Northwestern has proved that they are a team to be reckoned with, not only in the Big Ten, but in college football. But ever since the 2-game losing streak for Iowa, they are on a 3-game winning streak. And in those last 3 games, they are averaging 41.6 points per game. While Nebraska is allowing 436.3 yards per game, which is 84th in the FBS. And Nebraska, a 41-23 loss last week against Illinois, who I think at this point is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. In fact, has been one of the worst teams in the Big Ten in recent years. While Iowa, they are getting a lot better. They're scoring points. And I'm going to pick the Hawkeyes in this one. I just can't see how Nebraska is going to be able to stop Iowa from the hot streak that they're on. It means averaging over 41 points per game in these last 3 games. It's going to be tough for the Huskers. Although I will say this, their last 2 matchups, they have been very close. They have come down to game-winning field goals both times. So I think this game is going to be very close, but I just think Iowa is going to pull it out in the very end. And our third Friday game, number 2 Notre Dame taking on number 25 North Carolina. Now this one, I think it's going to be a trap game for Notre Dame. Now for Notre Dame and North Carolina, both these teams, believe it or not, are tied for 16th in the FBS in rushing offense. However, North Carolina, they have 2 running backs in the top 11 in rushing yards in Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, both rushing for over 800 yards this season so far. Williams has 15 rushing touchdowns while Carter has 4. But the one thing you don't want to hear if you're North Carolina or a Tar Heel fan is that Notre Dame is 5th in the FBS in rush defense, only allowing an average of 85.1 yards per game. So a top 5 rush defense. For North Carolina to pull off this upset, they have got to get through Notre Dame's run defense. Although the one thing that could be benefiting North Carolina, the thing that could work out in North Carolina's favor, is that quarterback Sam Howell is 4th in the FBS in passing yards, only behind UCF quarterback Dylan Gabriel, only behind SMU quarterback Shane Buechele, and behind Florida quarterback Kyle Trask, who is one of the Heisman favorites right now. So that could work out for North Carolina. Considering that Notre Dame, their pass defense gave up 439 passing yards to DJ Uiagalelei against Clemson. And you know what? Since we're in November in college football, the later on in the season college football goes, the crazier it gets. And you know what? I'm going to pick the upset. I think North Carolina is going to get it done against Notre Dame. I think Sam Howell is going to have, he's going to have a really big day through the air in this game, with Notre Dame giving up over 430 passing yards to Clemson backup quarterback DJ Uiagalelei. And I think if North Carolina if they can get past Notre Dame's run defense, I think it's going to be a long afternoon for the Irish. I'm going to pick North Carolina to pull off the upset. Another ACC showdown, and that is Pittsburgh taking on number 4 Clemson. Clemson, if they take care of their business, they'll be one of the 4 teams in the college football playoff, no doubt about it. But for Pittsburgh, they are 1st in the FBS in sacks with 40 sacks this season. And for Clemson, well, they have 30 sacks this season, which is tied for 4th in the FBS. And for Clemson, their game last week against Florida State was postponed, even though Clemson and Trevor Lawrence, they stated they were ready to play. Dabo Swinney said they were ready to play. Dabo Swinney said that they passed all of the procedures. But Florida State, it turns out that Florida State didn't want to play the game. They felt like it was it wasn't safe to play the game. But Clemson, I feel like they're going to be ready for this game. And what is going on with Clemson that is going to put this matchup in their favor? They are 5th in the FBS in passing yards, throwing for over 353 yards per game. And you have Trevor Lawrence back, the number 1 overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. And plus, it is senior day for Clemson. They're to be very motivated because they want to end their career in Death Valley with a win to go out to have the seniors go out on a high note, and Trevor Lawrence as well. So I will pick the Tigers in this matchup. Now in the preseason, this matchup looked like one of the better matchups of the week. But now I think this could be a matchup of job security. Because we've got Penn State, a winless Penn State team, and Michigan, who only got their second win of the season last week against Rutgers in triple overtime. So it could be possible that both these head coaches are on the hot seat, especially with the kind of controversy that James Franklin is in. After he told players to not talk to the cops about a fight that took place that involved star linebacker Micah Parsons. And for Michigan, well, their fans, they seem to be wanting Jim Harbaugh out, and many speculate that if Michigan would have lost to Rutgers last week, that Jim Harbaugh would have been fired by today. But Michigan, they may have picked up a conference win against Rutgers. Chase McNamara, it seems that he was the answer quarterback, but it was just against Rutgers. And I just think that Penn State, I think they're just due for at least one win at some point. And I think it could be this week. Although star tight end Pat Freiermuth is out for the season. So I'm going to pick Penn State in this one. I just really don't know who to pick. I feel like you can really flip a coin on this one because both teams, they've really underperformed this season. But I will pick Penn State to win this matchup. Next, we have LSU, the defending national champions, taking on number 5 Texas A&M. And for this matchup, this is going to be Texas A&M's first football game in nearly 3 weeks, as they've had their games against Tennessee and Ole Miss postponed. And for LSU, well, their defense has not been good all season long, especially their pass defense. And I know I gave Kellen Mond some criticism earlier in the season when doing the Florida and Texas A&M prediction, but Kellen Mond has proved me wrong all season. He seems to be getting better and better every single week, and that's a good sign if you're a fan of the Aggies that Kellen Mond is getting a lot better as the season goes along. Although my biggest concern is how will Texas A&M come out on this game not having played a game in nearly 3 weeks. But if it's anything like Wisconsin came out and dominated against Michigan, but it was just against Michigan. And if A&M comes out and dominates this game, it will be against an LSU defense that has been lackluster all season long. And I think it's still unknown who the LSU quarterback is going to be, or if it's going to be Miles Brennan, or if it's going to be TJ Finley. But one thing's for sure, A&M's quarterback will be Kellen Mond, and I think he's going to take advantage of LSU's lackluster secondary all throughout the season. I think this game could be very close, but I still think Texas A&M is going to get the job done this week and keep their college football playoff hopes alive for one more week. And we have the game of the week, the Iron Bowl, number 23 Auburn and number 1 Alabama. Well, it does seem like the kryptonite for Nick Saban is a ranked Auburn team, or a Auburn team that has more than 9 wins on the season. That seems to be his kryptonite, or at least one of them. The other one is the no-huddle offense. But I feel like Nick Saban has kind of been trying to learn to adapt to it a little bit better, but I still think he struggles with it. So those are his 2 kryptonites. As we've seen in the last few times the Iron Bowl has been played, the last 2 times that Alabama has lost the Iron Bowl, that's been his kryptonite. For Auburn to win this game, I think if they were to run the football against Alabama and keep the clock moving, have Bo Nix complete those short intermediate passes to keep the clock moving and keep Alabama's offense on the sidelines and that is led by Mac Jones, the quarterback, who is right now one of the Heisman favorites, along with Florida quarterback Kyle Trask. I think Auburn could have a good chance to win this one. However, Auburn has just looked really inconsistent to me. I mean, they struggled early on against Tennessee. They lost to South Carolina earlier in the season. They should have lost to Arkansas. I do feel like if Auburn can keep this game close, I do like their chances. Because Alabama's defense, there has been some points in the year where Alabama's defense just hasn't looked good at all, especially against Ole Miss. But Alabama's defense, I believe, is gotten better. It's only going to get better moving forward. And you have Najee Harris, who's rushed for 16 touchdowns so far this season. And even though wide receiver Jalen Waddle is out for the season, they still have more receivers to step up. They got John Mechie, and they've got Devonta Smith. And I'm going to pick the Tide in this one. I think the Tide may not necessarily roll over Auburn, but I think they're going to get the job done. Because Auburn, their inconsistencies so far this season, I'm just not sure if I can pick the Tigers pull off an upset here. So I'm going to pick Alabama. So those are my Week 13 college football predictions. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you next time.